The sky was clear over the forest that night, but then the stars moved like fire, and the ground shook like thunder as two bright objects screamed through the sky like angry comets. The birds flew away, the trees trembled, and silence turned into fear as the two ships crashed into the earth, far away from the nearest town. The forest burned for a short time, and then all was quiet again, but the lights in nearby homes blinked and went dark. The air smelled of smoke and strange metal, and in the middle of it all, two broken alien crafts lay hidden deep under green branches and shattered stone. Inside one of them, a tall figure stirred. Her skin was pale blue, her hair looked silver, and her armor was cracked. Her name was Zarel, a former guardian of the stars, and now a prisoner of exile. She groaned in pain as she pulled herself out from the wreck, her leg bleeding, and one arm limp beside her. A second figure moved inside the other craft. Smaller, more delicate, but just as strange. She had golden eyes and soft violet skin. Her name was Kima, and she had been a voice singer, a kind of healer among her people. Now she was nothing but an exile like her sister. They had both been cast out by their own kind, not for war crimes or betrayal, but for feeling emotions, for caring too deeply, for loving where love was forbidden. Their punishment was simple: be sent to a world where no one knew them, no one cared for them, and survive with nothing until they faded and were forgotten. That world was Earth in the nearest town. A young man named Liam sat in the dark. His lights had gone out, his phone lost signal, and his dog barked and stopped toward the forest. Liam was a mechanic, a quiet man who lived alone since his parents passed. He didn't fear the forest like others did. When he saw the strange lights and felt the crash, he grabbed a flashlight and followed the trail of broken trees and smoke. He didn't know what he would find, but something told him this was not just a fallen plane. As he got closer, he heard strange sounds, like electric humming and soft whispers. Then he saw the glow. The wrecks were still hot, but not burning, and the air around them shimmered with heat and power. Liam's eyes went wide when he saw the first figure stepping out from the wreck. Zoral was tall and proud, even with her injuries. She moved like a soldier and pointed something at him. It looked like a weapon, but it clicked weakly and did nothing. They stared at each other, her face full of anger and pain, his full of shock but not fear. Liam slowly raised both hands, showing he meant no harm, and then he spoke. "Are you hurt?" She didn't answer. He took one small step forward. Her hand twitched, but the weapon stayed still. Behind her, another voice came, soft and weak. It was Kima. She stumbled out of the second wreck and fell to her knees. Her lips moved, but her words were not human. Zarali turned quickly, caught her, and held her up for a moment. Her hard eyes softened as she looked down at Kima, who was shaking and cold. Liam dropped his bag and pulled out a blanket. He tossed it gently toward them, not too close, just enough that they could reach it. He then stepped back and waited. Zarali looked at the blanket, then at him, then at the sky above, which showed no stars, now only smoke and clouds. Kima pulled the blanket over her shoulders and whispered something to Zarali. Her voice cracked but warm. Zarali looked at Liam again, her face unreadable. She spoke a single word in her language, and it meant why Liam didn't understand, but he smiled a little and pointed to the forest, then his chest, then them, as if to say, "You are not alone, not tonight." They didn't move as he slowly backed away into the trees, but they watched him go. Later that night, the air grew colder, the wind howled, and the forest creaked, but Liam came back with more blankets, a jug of water, and some soft food. He didn't speak, just set them down at a safe distance and turned to leave again. Zarali watched from the shadows, her eyes still full of caution, but Kima looked at the food, then at Liam, and gave the smallest nod. That was the beginning of something no one had expected. Not the alien leaders who cast them out, not the people of Earth who never knew the stars were watching, not even Liam, who had only come to check a strange light in the sky. Deep in the forest, under broken stars and glowing trees, two exiled girls from the stars found a man who did not fear them, and for the first time in many cycles they felt something strange. It was not fear, it was not hate, it was hope. And hope was more dangerous than any weapon they had ever carried. Zarali stood outside the shelter they had built from broken parts and thick wood, her eyes sharp, and her hands ready for a fight. Even though her weapon had no power left, she still held it as if it meant something, as if it reminded her who she once was before the exile, before the shame inside Kima lay. Weak and pale, the crash had hurt her more than she showed her side, bruised her arm swollen, and her energy fading. She tried to stay strong, but her body trembled with every breath. She didn't understand Earth's air, or its cold, or its silence. The forest made strange noises that kept her awake. Animals moved in the night, leaves whispered secrets, wind pushed against the thin walls of their broken ship, and she knew they were not safe, not yet, not ever. Then came the footsteps, again steady, careful, not rushing, but not hiding either. Zarali crouched low near the tree's eyes, glowing faintly, her body ready to strike. Liam returned, carrying a heavy backpack and a rolled-up top over his shoulder. He moved slowly, hands open, an empty face. Calm and eyes tired but kind, he placed the supplies down just like before, at the same distance, and said nothing. Zarali didn't speak either. She waited until he turned to leave, and then stepped out from the shadows, her voice cold and low. "Why? Do you come back?" Liam paused, looked over his shoulder, and answered in his soft voice. "Because you need help." Zarali tilted her head. The words meant little, but the tone she understood. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't fear, it was care, and care confused her more than anything. She let him walk away again, and when he was gone she checked the bag inside. Were packets of food, water bottles, a small light device, and soft fabric. She didn't trust it at first, but Kima reached out and touched the cloth. Smiling faintly as she wrapped it around herself, he came again the next day, this time with firewood and a metal pot, and then again the day after with something strange. A small screen with pictures, sounds and voices. He tried to teach them simple words. Kima listened first. She copied his sounds slowly, shyly, and then laughed when he smiled at her. Zarali stayed quiet, but watched every move from the edge of the camp. Eyes narrowed, arms crossed. Liam drew pictures in the dirt. He pointed at himself and said Liam. He pointed at Kima and raised his brows. Kima nodded and said her name softly, her voice still weak, but stronger than before. Then he pointed at Zarali. She didn't answer. He tried again. "You name Zarali." Hesitated, then replied Zarali. Liam smiled and repeated their names with care, as if memorizing a song. Time passed slowly, but the days were no longer empty. Liam brought tools and showed them how to use hammers and nails, how to build walls from fallen logs, how to make a roof that didn't leak. When the rain came, Zarali tested everything twice, checked every nail, every rope, every joint. She said nothing, but made it clear she was watching, not just the work, but Liam. Kima sat beside the fire, most days helping when she could, learning new words and asking simple questions with her hands and voice. Sometimes she smiled at Liam, and he smiled back, and for a moment, the exile didn't feel so heavy. One night, as the fire crackled, and the moon rose high, sat near the edge of the clearing holding a cracked crystal in her hand. It was the last piece of her past, glowing faintly with lost energy. Liam noticed her sitting alone. He didn't approach, but watched from a distance, then quietly walked away, and came back with a small tool and clear resin. He knelt beside her without a word, and reached out. Zarali flinched, but didn't stop him. He worked slowly, sealing the crack with warmth and care. She didn't understand his tools, but saw the glow returned little by little, as the crystal pulsed softly in her palm. She looked at him, eyes full of questions. "Why?" Liam shrugged and said softly, "Because broken things still matter." Zarali stared at the crystal, then at him, her lips parted but no words came. She turned away, but held the crystal close to her chest for the first time. She didn't feel like an outcast, she felt like someone being seen. The next morning, Zarali helped Liam gather stones and logs. She didn't speak, but her hands moved with purpose, building stronger walls around the shelter, lifting without showing pain. Kima noticed the change. She said nothing, but her smile said enough. Later that day, dark clouds gathered, and the wind howled. The sky cracked with lightning, and the shelter shook under the storm, but the roof held. The fire stayed lit, and the three of them sat close together, safe and dry. In that moment, the forest felt less cold, the night less lonely, and the silence less cruel. Kima leaned her head on Liam's shoulders. Zarali sat across from them, holding the repaired crystal between her hands, her eyes watching but softer than before. They were still exiles, still far from home, still hunted by memories and lore, but in the heart of the wild earth, with a strange human and a quiet fire, they had found a small place that felt like shelter, like warmth, like the beginning of something new. The sun rose slow over the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. Where the shelter stood quiet and still, birds sang above, while wind danced through leaves, and in the center of it all, Kima sat beside the fire, holding a wooden bowl in her hands, staring at what Liam had given her. It was food, something warm and soft and strange, with smells she had never known before. She looked at it, then at Liam, who nodded with a smile, his hands open, as always, showing peace, not pressure. Kima took a small bite, her body jerked, and her eyes watered. The taste was too much too fast, but something in it reminded her of old days of comfort. She tried another bite, slower, this time, and slowly her body accepted it. From the edge of the clearing, stood with her arms crossed, her back straight, her eyes locked on them. She had not eaten earth food yet. She refused every offer, and kept her own distance like a warrior watching a camp that did not belong to her. Liam didn't push her. Instead, he brought out the small screen again, the one that showed pictures and made sounds. He sat on a log and placed it between them. Showing Kima more words, he pointed to a tree on the screen, and said tree, then pointed at the real one nearby. Repeated tree, her voice low but clear. Zarali rolled her eyes, but stepped 1 inch closer next. Liam showed the word water and handed her a bottle. She said water, and drank slowly every time she got a word right. Liam smiled, and tapped the screen. Soon Kima began pointing at things herself, guessing the words, and laughing when she got them wrong. Liam laughed too, not at her but with her, and that made her brave enough to try again. Zarali watched for a long time, then without a word she sat on a stone, not joining them, but no longer turning away. That evening, Liam brought something strange, a long stick with strings, and when he plucked it, soft music filled the air. Kima gasped and leaned forward, eyes wide as the sound touched something deep inside her. Zarali froze her breath, caught music was banned in their old world. Too many feelings, too many memories, too dangerous. But now they sat in Earth's wild heart with no rules, no watches, no punishments. Liam played with care fingers. Slow eyes focused, he did not sing, only played. Kima closed her eyes, and hummed softly a tune she had once known before exile, before shame. Zarali looked away, but her fingers tapped gently on her leg, to the rhythm she didn't even notice later. Kima picked up a stick and drew lines in the dirt, shapes of their language, mixed with human ones. She pointed to herself, then to the shape, and said Kima, then pointed to Liam and waited. Liam bent down and drew a line under her name, then wrote Liam beside it. Zarali watched them, then took another stick and walked to the dirt. Slowly she wrote her name in strong, straight strokes. Liam smiled and added a heart between the 3 names. Zarali stared at the heart, as if unsure what it meant, then turned and walked back to the shadows, but slower this time, not angry, just quiet. The next day Liam returned with tools and metal scraps. He showed them how to use nails and ropes, how to shape wood into chairs and shelves. Kima tried first, laughing as she failed again and again, but never gave up. Zarali finally stepped forward, took the hammer and struck once, then twice, then faster, building a shelf with fast hands and perfect aim. Liam clapped once and Kima cheered. Zarali looked away, hiding the small smile on her lips. They worked together through the day, and by night they had a stronger wall and a small table. At dinner, Liam shared food again. Kima accepted quickly, and this time Zarali took a small bite, her eyes narrowed, testing it carefully, then nodded once. That night they sat around the fire, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as people trying to understand. Kima asked Liam, where is home? He pointed to the stars, then to his chest, then to them. Zarali looked at him long and deep, her voice soft when she said we had no home, now we have something. Kima leaned on her sister's shoulder. Liam tossed another log on the fire, sparks rising like stars above them. The sky stretched wide and endless, and for the first time it did not feel empty. They spoke in broken words, but full hearts. They drew pictures in dirt and shapes in air. They shared music, laughter, silence, and trust in that small shelter. Deep in the forest, something was growing, not just learning, not just language, not just survival, something gentle, something bright, something dangerous to any who had ever said love was forbidden. They had come to Earth as exiles, but in the quiet between words and fire, they were learning something stronger than any rule. They were learning each other. It began with voices loud and rough, echoing through the trees, shaking the still morning peace. Birds flew from branches, and the wind changed as if it too sensed dangers. Zarali stood up fast, eyes sharp, body tense. Her hands reached for the old weapon, still useless, but always near her heart, raced not from fear but from instinct, the instinct to protect. Kima peeked from behind the shelter, worry clear in her golden eyes. She grabbed Liam's arm and whispered something he didn't understand, but the fear in her voice said enough. 3 men walked into the clearing, dirty boots, rough clothes, smirks on their faces. They called out to Liam, calling him strange, calling him fool, asking what he was hiding in the woods. Liam stepped forward, calm but firm, asking them to leave, telling them this was not their place, but the men only laughed louder. One of them kicked over a water jug, another grabbed the corner of the top and yanked it down, exposing the simple supplies and the drawings in the dirt. Then one of them saw Kima hiding and stepped closer, eyes narrowing, mouth twisting into a cruel smile. Zarali moved like lightning, stepping between them, her eyes glowing faintly, her voice low and dangerous. She spoke in broken English, leave now. The man laughed again, said some ugly words, and reached out to push her. In that moment something ancient rose inside Zarali. Her body surged forward. She grabbed his arm, twisted it hard, and threw him to the ground with shocking strength. The others jumped back, cursing, reaching for sticks and rocks. Kima screamed, Liam shouted, but Zarali did not stop. She struck again and again, not with hate, but with fire in her blood, the fire of someone who had lost too much then. A hand grabbed hers, not rough, not to stop her with force, but to calm her. It was Liam. His eyes met hers, not with anger, but with quiet. Zarali froze, breathing hard. Muscles tight, but slowly her fists loosened, and the man on the ground crawled away. The others helped him up, shouting threats as they ran back into the forest, leaves snapping under their boots. Silence returned, broken only by the crackling of fire, and the soft sobs of Kima. Zarali stood still for a long time, then turned away, walking deep into the trees alone. Liam wanted to follow, but Kima held his arm and shook her head. Later, when the sun fell and stars began to shine, Zarali returned her steps, slow, her eyes heavy. She sat down near the fire without a word, and placed her broken weapon on the ground. Kima moved beside her and whispered thank you in her soft voice. Zarali did not answer right away, then finally spoke. I did not want to see him hurt. Not again. Liam nodded and handed her a small cloth to wipe the dirt from her hands. She took it gently, her fingers brushing his. That night they sat together. No longer strangers, not yet a family, but something closer than before. Zaro leaned back and looked at the sky, her voice soft and far. Where we came from, strength meant silence, emotions were weakness, pain was hidden, love was forbidden, but here everything feels different. Liam didn't speak, he just listened, as Kima reached for her sister's hand and held it. The forest around them breathed slow and quiet, as if watching over them. They had survived another test, not of war, not of hunger, but of choice. Zarali had chosen to protect, not out of duty, but care. She had chosen not to kill, but to hold back for someone else. Trust had started to grow, not fast, not loud, but steady like roots in the ground. The next day they worked together again, fixing the top, rebuilding what had been kicked down. Liam showed them how to use wire and hooks to make traps, not for animals but for warnings, bells that would ring if someone stepped too close. Zarali tested each trap twice, her face serious but calm. Kima painted symbols on wood to place around the camp, signs that meant safety in her old tongue. Liam cooked something new, and this time Zarali ate first, her face unreadable until she gave a small nod that meant good. When night came, Kima sang a soft tune, and Liam played his stringed stick, following her notes with gentle hands. Zarali sat beside them, arms crossed, but feet tapping lightly to the beat. The fire glowed bright and warm, casting shadows on the trees, and the three faces, lit by its flame, looked up at the stars with something new in their eyes. Not fear, not pain, not exile, but trust. Trust built on fire and silence, and one shared fight. Trust that might one day become something even stronger, something none of them dared name. Yet, but all of them felt they had come from different worlds, carried different wounds, spoke different words, but now they sat together in peace, surrounded by the wild earth, and in that peace, something sacred had begun. The sky turned strange that morning. The clouds moved like they were afraid, pulled and twisted by something high above, something no one on earth could see, but two alien hearts felt it before any signal or sound. Zarali stood still, her eyes on the horizon, her hands clenched around a broken piece of metal, her breath slow but heavy. She knew this feeling. It was pressure, not from the ground, not from the air, but from something older, something from home. Kima dropped her wooden bowl and placed both hands on her head, whispering words from her old world. Her voice shook. Her body trembled and her eyes filled with fear. She looked at the sky and then at Zarali and said one word. Judges. Liam looked between them, confused, not sure what had changed. He followed their eyes, saw only clouds, but felt the cold rise in his bones. He stepped closer, placed a hand on Kima's shoulder, but she pulled back, not from him, but from the memory now waking inside her. Zarali turned and walked fast to the edge of the camp, pulled open the broken panel of the ship, and reached for the small round device hidden under wires. She pressed her thumb against it and waited. It blinked red once, twice, and then spoke in their language. Unfinished mission signal incomplete. Council response triggered. Kima cried out and backed away, her hands shaking, her knees weak. She whispered again and again. They should not come. They were not supposed to come. We are forgotten. We are gone. Liam grabbed a device, trying to understand. Zarail pulled it away, her voice low and sharp. They are not here to save us. They are here to erase us. Zarali explained slowly, using words Liam knew. Judges were not people. They were enforcers, machines mixed with mind. They followed no heart, no mercy. Their only task was to punish forever those who broke the old law. And the worst crime was not violence, not theft, not betrayal. It was love. Kima had sung a forbidden song for a forbidden one. Zarali had helped her escape, and together they had chosen freedom over silence, emotion over order. Now the punishment was not exile, but final end. A beam of pale light cut through the clouds for 1 second. The trees bent, the ground shook, birds screamed, and vanished into the sky. Zaril grabbed Liam, pulled him under the shelter, and covered him with her body. Kima crawled close behind, holding tight to the stone Liam had given her days ago. The beam faded, but its warning was clear. They are near. Zarali stood and looked around, eyes searching, mind racing. She pointed to the shipwreck and shouted, "We build now." Liam helped without question, pulling wires, dragging metal, stacking crates. Zarali directed with calm fury, her voice firm, her hands fast. She knew how to make a wall, how to make a shield, how to turn wreck into defense. Kima placed small crystals around the edge of the shelter, whispering into them, calling on energy she had not used in so long. Her voice cracked, but steady, her fear now mixed with fire. Liam cut his hand on sharp metal. Zaral saw the blood and paused for just a moment. She took his hand, wrapped it with cloth, and said nothing. The sky darkened again, but this time no light came, only silence to quiet. Then a sound like metal screaming, but soft and deep like it came from inside the bones. It passed over them, and then around them, searching. The judges were scanning. Zareli turned to Kima and said, "We fight or we die." Kima nodded, but tears ran down her face, not from fear of death, but from fear of losing what they had found. Liam placed his hands on both of theirs, and said slow and clear, "We protect this place, we protect each other." Kima's voice broke when she said, "You should run," but Liam shook his head and smiled no. That night the forest held its breath. The trees stood still, the fire burned low, and the stars hid behind the clouds. Inside the shelter 3 figures sat close, weapons weak, hearts full. They had no army, no orders, no backup. But they had something the judges never understood: love. Zarali sat with her back to the door, eyes open, ears sharp, her weapon charged with the last bit of power they had. Kima held the crystals in her lap, whispering songs of strength, not for her people, but for this strange world that gave them peace. Liam stayed between them, calm eyes, steady hands, ready. He had no alien blood, no strange gifts, but he had courage, and that was enough. Above them the enemy waited, cold, empty, full of law, but no soul below them. The earth stood strong, not with weapons, but with will. The exile was no longer punishment, now it was a standard choice. A home worth fighting for. The sky opened with a roar, louder than thunder, brighter than lightning, as the enemy ship broke through the clouds above. The forest shaking, the ground and burning the air. The trees leaned away as if the earth itself feared what was coming. Zarali stood in front of the shelter, her arms spread, her weapon ready though nearly drained, her eyes locked on the sky, her voice steady as she shouted orders in her own tongue. Kima ran across the clearing, dropping crystals into small holes around the camp, each one glowing faint blue as it connected with the soil. She sang as she moved, her voice old and strong, her tone full of sadness and courage. Liam pulled wires into place near the wreckage, his hands cut and burned from sharp edges. His shirt soaked in sweat, his jaw clenched as he locked each piece into the strange device. Zarali had taught him to build above them. The ship circled, its shape black and smooth, without windows or wings, only shadow and weight, a presence that crushed hope like glass under boot. Then the first strike came. A beam of red energy fell from the sky and hit the edge of the camp. The ground exploded. Dirt flew, trees fell, fire spread in a wide circle, but the crystals held. The damage stayed outside the line. The shield shimmered, weak, but still alive. Zarali raised her weapon and fired into the sky. The bolt barely reached halfway before fading into smoke. Liam yelled that the device needed more power. Zarali shouted that they had no more. Kima dropped to her knees and pressed her palms into the dirt, singing louder, her voice shaking. The crystals began to pulse, faster, brighter, drawing energy from the earth, from the sky, from her. Zarali turned to Liam and shouted, "We cannot hold long." Liam ran to her, grabbed her hand, and looked into her eyes. His voice low and clear, "Then we make it count." A second beam struck, this one closer. The force pushed them back, and part of the shelter collapsed. Kima screamed but kept singing, her voice cracking but not stopping. Zarel pulled Liam behind the last wall left, and covered him with her body again. He looked up at her face, bruised and burning, and said, "You came back." Zareli nodded once, and whispered, "Always." Then Kima collapsed, her body, still, her hands open, the crystals around her glowing wild and hot. Liam rushed to her side, lifted her into his arms, and held her close. She opened, her eyes weak and fading, and touched his face, her voice barely air. "You made this place home." Zarali dropped beside them, eyes wide, her hands moved over Kima's chest, checking for wounds, checking for life. Kima smiled and whispered, "My power to the shield, keep them safe." Then the crystals exploded with light, not fire, not sound, just pure light. The enemy ship shuddered above the glow, reached into the sky like fingers, grabbing the black shadow and holding it still. Zarali looked up and screamed. In her own tongue, a cry of rage and love and fear all mixed into one. Liam grabbed her hand as the light rose higher, surrounding the ship, wrapping it in chains made of sound and memory and song. Then silence. The ship stopped moving. It hovered. Then pulled upward, fast, then faster, and vanished into the clouds, leaving nothing behind, not even wind. The crystals dimmed, the shield faded, the fire died. The ground stopped shaking, the forest side Kima lay still, her eyes closed, her body pale. Held her close, whispering her name over and over. Her voice broken. Liam sat beside them, covered in ash, holding Kima's hand in his heart heavy. But his soul full of something too big for words. They stayed there until the sun rose again, until the birds returned, until the wind carried only the scent of smoke and the promise of peace. Later they buried the crystals in a circle and built a stone marker in the center. Kima's name carved in both languages, earth and stars. Zarali placed the broken weapon on the stone and stepped back. Liam took her hand, and she let him. They stood in silence, not as exile and stranger, not as warrior and human, but as two who had seen the worst and still chosen hope. In the days that followed, they rebuilt the shelter stronger with wood and stone and memories. Arlie no longer spoke like a soldier, she spoke like someone who had lost and loved and lived. Liam laughed more, even when the pain came, even when the nights felt too quiet. He always looked up at the stars and whispered a name. Sometimes Zarli sang Kima's song under her breath, soft and slow, while the fire crackled and the trees listened. They had fought for a place they never chose, had bled for a world that never asked for them, had found something more powerful than fear. They had found each other in fire and sorrow and sacrifice, and in that they had found love. The sky was clear again, the stars shining like silent watchers above the forest. The air soft with the scent of ash and rain. The fire in the camp burned low, casting slow shadows on the ground, where two figures sat close and quiet. Zarali stared at the flames, her eyes dull and tired, her hands resting in her lap, her fingers brushing the edge of Kima's crystal necklace, now worn around her neck, not for power, but for memory. Liam placed another log on the fire and watched her, his voice soft. When he finally spoke, "The worst is over." Now Zarali shook her head slowly, her voice rough and low. "Not yet, they are not done." Liam looked up at the stars, then back at her, and asked, "What do you mean?" Zarali pointed to the sky, her eyes sharp again. "They will send more. They will see the shield, the light, the love, and they will try to erase it." Again Liam leaned forward, his face close to hers, and said, "Let them try this time. We will be ready." Zarali looked at him for a long moment, then reached out and touched his face with fingers that once only held weapons. Now they held something softer, something human. In the days after the attack, they rebuilt the shelter, made it stronger, made it theirs. The trees around them seemed to lean in, as if protecting them. The animals returned, and the wind carried songs instead of fears. Zarali trained Liam every morning, taught him how to move like a fighter, how to hear danger before it came, how to hold a weapon even if it was just a stick and belief. Liam taught her how to plant seeds, how to fix broken things with simple tools, how to laugh at small mistakes, how to feel without shame. They spoke in both languages, now mixing words into something new, something that belonged only to them. At night Zarali would sit under the stars and tell stories of her world, of the cities in the clouds, of the endless rules, of the voices that watched every move, every thought. Liam would listen and then tell her of earth, of rivers and deserts, of old songs and simple joys, of things that were never perfect, but always alive. One morning, while gathering water near the streams, Zarali felt a change in the air, not danger, but something close to it, a quiet that was not natural. She looked up and saw a ship, not a judge ship, but small, old and shaking. As it dropped toward the forest, she ran back to the camp, shouting for Liam. They both stood together, watching the sky, waiting. The ship landed hard in the clearing, nearby, steam and dust rising from its sides. The door opened, and a figure stepped out, smaller than Zarali, covered in robes, their face hidden, but their voice familiar. Three froze, then whispered her name. It was their old teacher, the one who had once taught them the ancient songs before the rules had turned to change. The figure spoke slowly, carefully, asking if they had chosen Earth, or if Earth had chosen them. Zarali answered with no fear, "We chose love." The figure nodded and stepped back, saying others were watching, others were wondering if maybe the law was wrong, if maybe feeling was not weakness. Raleigh said nothing more, just watched as the ship lifted and vanished again, leaving no trace but a small crystal box with a message inside. Kima's voice, recorded long before her last stand, filled the camp. Soft and warm, she spoke of freedom, of beauty, of the human who gave her hope when all was dark, of Zarali, who never let go, of Liam, who taught them how to live. Again Zarali cried for the first time since the day they buried her, tears silent and full of light. Liam held her close and whispered words she did not need to understand, because the meaning lived in his hands, in his breath, in his choice to stay. Seasons changed, the forest grew wild around them, but their camp remained strong. Not just wood and stone, but memory. And Lovis Aral no longer looked to the sky with fear, but with quiet strength, knowing that no matter what came next, they would face it. Together one night she placed her hand on Liam's chest, felt his heartbeat, and said slow and clear, "This is home, not a planet, not a city, not a ship, but this moment, this bond, this love." And in that truth, they found peace, not because the war was over, not because the threat was gone, but because they had made something that even the stars could not break. Home was never a place, it was always a feeling, and now they knew it fully, completely together.